You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Gold, crude oil, corn, soybeans, and more. With so many tradable products, the futures options market can be an intimidating place. How can you possibly keep track of the latest trading developments across so many different products? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Welcome to This Week in Futures Options, the program designed to help active futures options traders stay on top of this ever-changing marketplace. Each week, we'll break down the top trades, hot products, volatility explosions, and much more. This Week in Futures Options streams live, so be sure to check out our live stream via the Mixlr app. That's MIXLR. Or join our live chat room at mixlr.com/options-insider. Whether you're an experienced veteran or a newcomer looking to separate the wheat from the lean hogs, This Week in Futures Options has the information you can't find anywhere else. This Week in Futures Options is brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. For more information and educational resources about futures options at CME Group, visit cmegroup.com/options. This Week in Futures Options is also brought to you by FTSE Russell, a leading global provider of benchmarks, analytics, and data solutions. For more information, please visit ftserussell.com, cboe.com, and cmegroup.com. And now, get ready to break down the latest futures options trading activity. It's time for This Week in Futures Options.
All right, everybody, if you can't tell by that music, doing something a little bit different here on Twifo today. Of course, it is the Christmas Eve holiday. We're not savages. We're not monsters here. Not going to make people come in and record a show during the holidays. But don't worry, we're not going to leave you hanging. Got some great content coming at you. We have crunched the numbers. All the downloads, all the streams you guys have sent our way for Twifo over the course of 2020, a record year. I might add, I want to thank all of you for tuning in, not just to Twifo, but for everything we've been doing here on the network. You guys have responded in droves, and we appreciate that. Let's break down, let's look, let's see. What were you guys tuning into for Twifo this year? Here are your top 5 episodes of This Week in Futures Options for 2020. Starting in at number 5, we have Twifo episode 211, Feeling Precious about nat gas. That aired on August 6th of this year. Our guests were, of course, our old friend, Mr. Sean Smith from FTSE Russell, and the once in future Dr. Bix himself, Mr. Russell Rhodes. You can tell by the title that nat gas was a topic of conversation. We talked about the skew in nat gas was fading, a continued rally in the future. We also hit on equities, silver, and gold. Those metals, of course, were moving quite a bit. By the way, our top movers and shakers for the week. To the light side, it was nat gas, up 21.3%. To the dark side, Class 3 milk, 20.2%, with almost 10,000 contracts on the tape. So that was maybe one of the early parts of the dairy resurgence we saw out there. On that show, we also discussed equities volatility. RBX, aka the small cap VIX, was at about a 30. VIX itself at about a 22.5 on the show. So quite a chasm between small cap and large cap vol. Metals had hit a new record high for the 5th straight session. Gold was closing in on 2,100. But of course, we also talked about its other precious sibling, silver, on the show. Crude is also coming into a 5-month high on the show. Of course, traders doing that ever-present dance between demand concerns and what was going on the supply front. We had WTI coming into showtime a little bit north of 42, about 42.05. So, of course, the magical, mythical 40 handle that it has vacillated around throughout most of 2020. We also answered your questions in our feedback segment about commodity ETFs, whether there are any out there that we liked, and some opportunities for volatility traders in the market. That was your number 5 episode of Twifo for the year, episode 211, Feeling Precious about Nat Gas. And then coming in at number 4 on our top 5 episodes of Twifo for 2020 listeners was episode 217, Crazy Crude and Exploding Equity Volatility. That aired on September 17th of this year. And what did we talk about on the program? Well, on the movers and shakers, WTI was leading the dance to the upside, up nearly 10%, coming on the heels of a week where it was number 4 in the other direction, off about almost 7%. And leading the dance to the dark side was Nat Gas, off about 9.25%. It was number 1 in the other direction, up 14.35%. The week before, what was driving all this madness? Well, it was a crazy week for crude oils, up nearly 10%. Of course, what was driving all this nearly 10% upside action in WTI? Well, if you recall, middle of this year, a lot of hurricanes hitting the Gulf. So that certainly contributed to the near-term rally in WTI. Also was a surprise drop in crude inventories out there. And as a result of the hurricanes, over 27% of all offshore oil and gas production in the Gulf was shut down coming into showtime. So that, of course, contributing to the rally out there. On the equity front, RVX, so the small cap VIX at about a 30, VIX at about 27.25, so right around 3 points separating those two. Also talked about Eurodollars on the show that week. They were number 2 to the dark side. And then, of course, we answered some questions from you guys in our feedback segment about gold collars, taking delivery on corn, the proverbial truckload of corn, and treasury bonds. And of course, we were joined in the hot seat by none other than the rock lobster himself, Mr. Andrew Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. All right, now coming in number 3 on your list of the top 5 most popular episodes of Twifo for this year, as chosen by you, the listeners, in terms of your downloads and your streams and everything else that you guys do out there. It was Twifo 213, Surging Equities, Mysterious FX, Monstrous Metals, and more. We got a little alliterative on that title. That aired on August 20th of this year. We had our old buddy, Mr. Sean Smith, on the show with us, as well as our new buddy, Mr. Dan Gramza. And what was moving and shaking on the show that week? Nat Gas was leading the dance to the upside, up 9.5%. It was number 2 in the same direction the week before, up 5.7%. Hot on his heels was Eurodollars at number 2 with about 9%. Bitcoin, number 11. You guys always ask about Bitcoin. It was only up a paltry 2.5% that week. To the dark side, number 1 was Platinum, off 5.84%, followed by Silver, off about 2% on the week. Equity vol, small cap vol, RVX at about a 29, VIX at about a 23. So interesting. Small cap vol remaining elevated even as VIX, aka large cap vol, coming in a little bit, a similar level to what we're seeing out there right now. We also talked about energy on the show that week. Talked about demand, obviously an ongoing question out there, and what the surprise drop in gas inventories could mean for crude and energy demand going forward. Obviously, not a big driving season this year, so that was certainly impacting demand. And on your futures options feedback, answer your questions, but why Twifo is a half an hour after the option block as opposed to immediately after. Spoiler alert, we need time to prep and turn it around. And back in the days when we had guests, we needed time to bring the guests in. Sometimes they came with delicious burgers, which was always fun and worth a half an hour in between. These days, not so much. We also started one of our long-running themes on the program this year, the cross-asset correlation. And so we broke down some interesting correlations for the year from January through the date of this show, which was, of course, August 20th. If you're wondering, through that show there on August 20th, Bitcoin was negatively correlated to the S&P by 27%. So interesting times out there as we keep on rolling with our list. Listeners, we're all the way, hard to believe, we're all the way at number 2, our second most popular episode of the year here for Twifo, episode 214, Fed versus Inflation, plus a vol breakdown in metals, equities, and ags. We're joined once again by our old buddy, Mr. Sean Smith from FTSE Russell on the show that week. Leading the movers and shakers to the upside was Nat Gas, a theme for our top episodes here, up nearly 8%. It was number 1 in the same direction the week before, up nearly 10% the week before. To the dark side was Eurodollars, off about 6 2/3%. It was number 2 to the upside the week before, up 9%. Even equities in terms of small cap vol at about a 30, VIX at about 25, so about a 5-point spread, large cap to small cap vol. That was, of course, on the heels of the now infamous decision coming out of the Fed to effectively change the way the Fed looks at inflation. That was a big deal, still is a big deal. We're still weighing the ramifications for that. We're seeing right now assets like gold and Bitcoin having tremendous years as a result of perhaps the changing landscape and outlook for inflation out there, and all that was kicking off that week, which is probably why the show catapulted into the top of the rankings out there. We also saw the announcement of the pending launch of the options on the Micro E-mini S&P 500 and NASDAQ futures over there at CME. We also did a big breakdown of metal volatility across the board, so gold and silver. Throwing a little bit of copper there as well. We also answered some of your questions about it was an ongoing thread, your confusion over futures symbology. Yeah, we're with you. Dan Gramzo was on the show with us the episode before. He was still confused. Everyone's confused about the symbol. It doesn't really make sense. You kind of just have to roll with it at this point, listeners, because they're not going to change it. All right, we've come to it now, listeners. The number 1 episode of Twifo for 2020, the one you guys downloaded and streamed and listened to the most. It was episode 212, Driven by the Dollar. It aired on August 13th of this year with our good friend, Mr. Sean Smith, and our guest in the CME hot seat, Mr. John Brady from RJO. What was moving and shaking that week? Well, lumber was lighting it up to the light side, up nearly 11%, about 10.75%. It was number 2 the week before. That continued a trend where lumber had been dominating our light side charts for the better part of the past few weeks before the show. To the dark side, Eurodollars taking a drubbing off 16.25%. In terms of equity vol, RVX at about a 30 still. It was kind of locked at that level for a while, versus VIX at about a 22, so that chasm widening between large cap and small cap volatility. We also talked about the impending launch of the newest addition to the volatility market of VolQ on that episode. And of course, our guest from RGO liked himself some rates, so we took a deep dive into Treasury volatility and what's been going on in the Treasury and the rates markets over the course of the previous weeks. And we also talked about some record volumes coming out of CME on the metals front that week as well. And we rounded it out with your perennial question. Are we surprised that WTI could remain above the 40 strike despite the fact that the option skew has pretty much been fading it throughout the entirety of the year until pretty much very recently? We also answered your questions about futures options brokers and why so many of them are still, shall we say, behind some of their equity options peers when it comes to technology and execution and all of that fun stuff. So there we have it, listeners, your top 5 episodes of Twifo as chosen by you, the listeners. It was a record year for Twifo, record year for pretty much everything on the network this year. And that's really because of you guys. We are deeply grateful to everyone who took the time out of their busy schedules this year to listen to our content and, of course, send in your feedback, listen live, leave your reviews on your platform, download our app, everything you guys did this year. You guys are always looking for more. We're going to have more for you in 2021, so stay tuned for that, and we'll see you back here soon with new episodes of This Week in Futures Options.
It's time to find out what's rallying on the light side and falling to the dark side at CME Group this week. It's time for the Movers and Shakers Report. It's time to get our hands dirty exploring the latest options trades and trends in corn, wheat, soybeans, and more. It's time to talk ags. It's time to tap into the deep options well of black gold, Texas tea, nat gas, and more. It's time to talk energy. The dollar, the euro, the yen, and more. It's time to explore what's happening in major currency options around the world. It's time to talk FX. Werewolves beware. It's time to explore the options activity in silver, gold, and other shiny things. It's time to talk metals. The Fed, the yield curve, inflation fears. How are they impacting options activity and volatility in your favorite interest rate products? Let's find out as we explore the world of rates. This Week in Futures Options is brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world manage risks and seize opportunities. CME Group offers the deepest and most liquid options on futures across all asset classes, including interest rates, equity indexes, foreign exchange, energy, agriculture, and metals. For more information and educational resources about futures options at CME Group, visit cmegroup.com/options. This Week in Futures Options is also brought to you by FTSE Russell, a leading global provider of benchmarks, analytics, and data solutions. Investors in the U.S. and around the world are using FTSE Russell indexes to benchmark their investment performance and create investment funds, ETFs, structured products, and index-based derivatives. Many Options Insider Radio Network listeners will be familiar with the Russell 2000 Index. Russell 2000 futures and options are currently trading on the Chicago Board Options Exchange and CME Group. For more information, please visit ftserussell.com, cboe.com, and cmegroup.com. This broadcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute trading advice or the solicitation of purchases or sale of any futures or options. The rulebook of the applicable exchange should be consulted as the authoritative source on all current contract specifications. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.